government, even at Emondlo, Ngagotelezin Lapa in the sports ground. They were looking at celebrating Human Rights Day with the midday team. And of course, you've had some reflection with the locomotion on the drive as far as human rights are concerned. I'm mentioning all of this because today we want to take a turn and look at some of the laws which, of course, are always there when you talk about rights. Umthetho uyuphasiswa Parliament, and that's what we've been privileged to learn as well today and many other days. And ekuphasweni kwawo Parliament, what happens is that it then goes via a process that I'm going to be speaking with today, Philip Rosenthal, to discuss it. He's part of the people who were part of this democratic progress or process. So there's a law in South Africa ezokwenza izinto ezifana ne-meme to be sending you to jail because it refers to something. Certain things people can take offense in this country manje includes age. It also includes umsebenzi. Uma kuguthi uyasola ukuthi inkulumo ekhulunywe kuwe has been very offensive and very harmful. The law that has been passed 7 days ago, Philip is going to explain more of this to us as well. It incriminates things like that, freedom of speech. Philip, welcome to Vuma FM. Thank you for your time this evening.
Hi there.
So you're speaking to me this evening as I'm trying to explain to the listener at home context, Human Rights Day, and everything that has happened. So you are in a process as a person that's submitting on behalf of a religious group, right? The Christian Worldview, isn't it? And you're making submissions in regards to this hate speech bill that will see things as I was explaining here, like memes being found to be offensive, sending people to jail.
Yes, that is the concern. And the thing is that nobody wants to protect people who incite violence. But this law is not only stopping people who incite violence, it's also it's defining hate speech very broadly, so that it's anyone's guess how it will be interpreted when it goes to court. And that means that anybody who says something controversial that offends somebody else could find themselves facing a criminal charge. And we know many examples of how what has happened with controversial speech under the Equality Act, which is a civil offense, but this would make it a criminal offense and then potentially send people to jail, which is a much bigger threat, and thus could chill free speech on all sorts of topics, including religious ones and including potentially political debate, and we feel that's really unhealthy and unhelpful.
Another nugget we just got to throw there before we start the conversation is, of course, this point of contention, the impact statement, as the bill itself says, right? That's all. That's going to be enough for the court to consider as evidence. The impact, the socio-economic impact that harm has caused to a person. You took offense to that as well. Not offense and such, but you've got a bone to pick with that impact statement, don't you?
Yes, well, look, the thing is that if it was just physical harm that we were talking about, then we wouldn't have a problem with a law like this, except for the fact that there are already laws that that stop people from saying things that incite physical harm. But if you, as this bill has said, if they are prohibiting what they call social harm, what does that mean? I can argue that your political viewpoint is causing social harm, or your religious viewpoint is causing social harm, and you could argue my view is causing social harm. And I could say, well, I've had psychological harm because I'm hurt by what you said, and therefore you should go to jail. So that is, to me, really dangerous. And what we've seen, for example, in other countries is, in fact, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan now is facing similar charges because he said things that the new government says is unacceptable, and thus he could be arrested and put in jail. And In Finland, a similar thing is happening to a cabinet minister. In Canada, we've had an evangelist who's faced criminal charges for offending LGBT people in attempting to convert them. In Durban, we had an Indian evangelist who was offended Hindu people, and an interest group then wanted to take him to court under the Equality Act. And thankfully that was settled out of court. But now with this bill, if it continues through, and we hope it will be stopped or improved, if this is not stopped, then all those people in a similar situation could be facing threats, including the current politicians could be then put under threat by future politicians. So it's very, very dangerous.
That is the crux and the body and the middle of the conversation we're going to have with Philip Rosenthal from the Christian Worldview. They also submitted some of the laws, the bills that are being passed into law. Ikakhulukazi ezo affect what you tweet as well as what you say. Now, the problem with my guest here that we were discussing before we went to the air break is the fact that there are instances whereby this law is feared now. People can change your words in that impact statement esichazayo nesoba ubufakazi banele to a court that indeed your words or utterances were harmful. It has been passed in the past 7 days into by Parliament, and it's in a process ezoyake National Council of Provinces inakumongameli etc. So kusanethuba lokuthi inhlangano ke ifana nalezi zale guest namhlanje Mr. Phil Rosenthal then hopeful that they're going to oppose this law. So let's look back. We'll come back. Thanks for staying on the line, by the way, Philip. We're looking at when it came back or came in. This bill, what was it intended in 2018 when it was introduced in Parliament?
Okay, well, in fact, this bill was they had the first attempt to try and pass it in about 2004. Then they scrapped that idea, thankfully, and they brought it back again in 2018. And
right.
that bill was much worse than this present bill because it didn't have exemption, or didn't even attempt to put exemption clauses for things like press freedom and religious freedom. And so that was agreed as a concession to try and make the bill more acceptable. But the way that the religious and press exemptions are worded leaves them vulnerable so that they're actually not as much protection as what they seem. And we've been fighting with the politicians to try and motivate changes to this law that would give better protection to religious freedom, to press freedom, academic freedom, even if they did pass the bill overall. And those improvements were supported by the ACDP, the Democratic Alliance, Al Jamaa, which is the Muslim party, and I think the Inkatha Freedom Party wanted the improvements to protect religious freedom, but they still overall supported the bill. But this was not agreed to by the ruling party, and so we were very disappointed with that. The one improvement that they did do was to remove what they called cultural harm, which nobody could understand what it meant.
Was, yeah.
Anybody can say, well, what you're saying harms my culture. But what they have left behind is social harm, which nobody can really explain, again, what it means. But they seem to be trying to push through this bill in the biggest hurry that they can, I think because they're worried then the next election will come around before they're finished, and so they're trying to get it finished as quickly as possible. And we're going to have the opportunity at the National Council of Provinces to have another attempt to put these improvements through.
Yeah.
And the listeners, if they wish to, can also send a submission to the National Council of Provinces when that opportunity comes.
Let's start with what it is, in fact, because, of course, you're saying improvements, which means there are some sections of this bill which we're talking about. If you just joined us, by the way, it's the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill. It speaks of many things, including reference to. So, under the new laws, the hate speech should be defined as a clear intention to be harmful or incite harm or promote or propagate hatred. So if you find that the way that somebody spoke of your occupation or your trade, his intentions is to be harmful and incite harm, then you can write an impact statement. Let's speak about some of the parts of it that you agree with. The current laws, are they not enough in protecting speech that is harmful or people that are inciting violence to be held accountable?
Well, I think that the current laws are more than adequate. We've got a law against incitement of violence. We've got Riotous Assemblies Act, which can stop people from causing violence. You can also interdict somebody who's started inciting problems, as was just done even yesterday. Then a court can make a specific order. And then you've also got the common law crime of crimen injuria, that if somebody really goes and insults somebody else really severely, then they can be punished for that. But there's a narrow definition of that, which means that you can't arbitrarily just decide that what somebody else is saying is criminal or hate speech. Whereas this thing leaves things very wide open. And we had an example just about a year ago where a judge declared that flying the old South African flag was hate speech. Now, I don't have any personal interest in flying the old South African flag. To me, it's just a historical thing. But I also don't see that just doing that is hate speech. It's not inciting anybody to violence.
Okay.
Somebody might find it offensive, but somebody might also find the gospel offensive. So we don't want to put people in jail for saying things that are offensive.
What are some of the consequences that people like you are foreseeing should a bill like this be passed into law? I mean, we always use this they language, and it sounds as if it's conspiracy theories, really. Who's they that's out to get you? Who's they that's passing laws to make sure you are a dog with its tail between its legs during election times? Could you talk to that concern?
Well, I think there's, in the work that I do, I'm saying things that are controversial all the time, as are many other people involved in lobbying the political process or in public media debate. And I think that there is a serious risk that I could go to jail for under this law, which is why I'm very motivated to fight against this. But I also don't want to see opponents who hold the opposite view to me going to jail. I would rather have a proper debate about this and about our differences, unless there is an incitement of violence. And this is something which was settled a few hundred years ago in Europe. They had many religious wars, and whichever group was in power was putting the other side in jail and or burning them at the stake. And then people realized this wasn't a good way to sort out our differences. We'd rather sort them out in a civilized way with debate. But now it seems that and there was a very unhappy period under the communist regimes and the fascist regimes, which did shut down free speech. And those countries, most of them have really saying, we don't want to go back there. So I think there's this idea of freedom of speech is something which has been proven over time to be the best way of settling our differences, and rather than the government deciding who is right and who is wrong and shutting up the people that they think are wrong.
Let's talk about defamatory. I mean, I would think that already we do have cases whereby people, civil matters are handled very well when people are defaming others in the public eye. There's people who've been fined and so forth. What jail time does a person in this law now proposed is going to be faced by a person who's found to be harmful in their speech?
Well, it's proposing up to 8 years in jail, which then creates a ridiculous situation because you've got up to 7 years in jail for breaking an entry into your house. So potentially, if you say something offensive to the burglar who's burgling your house, you can go to jail for longer than him. And that doesn't seem fair to me at all. We did argue to try and reduce the penalty to something that is more proportionate. But when you combine that with a lack of protection for religious freedom and a very vague definition of what is social harm, there's also the risk of it's got economic harm as well, which means that if somebody is inciting a boycott, and then somebody says, okay, your incitement of a boycott is causing me economic harm, then I can send you to jail. That is very dangerous from a number of points of view. It means that innocent people can go to jail, but the thing is that it also makes a potentially explosive situation where people are angry and want to do some sort of boycott that they are then, if their leaders are jailed, then that can just lose their confidence in the system further. So to me, it's not a good way to go.
Where do we stand at the moment? But now you're saying that we still have to go to the National Council of Provinces. Take us through the process now we are to undergo before it's passed into law.
Well, the first step will be to the National Council of Provinces, which I would expect possibly within a few weeks, because they are trying to push this thing quite hard, and then they will advertise for public participation, and I would encourage the listeners to participate there and to speak up. And if you want to follow the detail, you can go to Christian View Network Facebook /Christian View Network, and you can see the latest things that are happening. But then if it is passed, then it will go to back to the Parliament to be ratified, and then it will after that it will go to the President, and we will lobby the President not to sign it. If he does sign it, then it will it is likely that there's groups that have said they're already planning to challenge this in court, and we would support them, and then that will work its way up to the Constitutional Court, and then from there to specific cases where people are charged with hate speech, and then we will have to try and defend them one by one to set the boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and one hopes that the courts will make decisions that will narrow the scope of what is in this law, as they did, for example, on the Kwalani hate speech case, which was decided on about a year and a half ago. The courts said that part of the Equality Act was unconstitutional, and so they proposed a change in that. But it still wasn't good, the end result that they had, and it still puts us at a lot of risk from a civil side. But now this is more extreme from a criminal side.
Phil, thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you for joining us to talk about this bill.
Okay, great.
That was Philip Rothenthal, the part of a group of those who are writing and trying to oppose, as you may have heard there. This bill that's now going to be law in South Africa, of course, should they not be able to convince the president and as well as the National Council of Provinces. We're talking about laws that are being signed into Inningizimu Africa or should we say bill, that is going to be signed into law here in South Africa. Some of the things, of course, include disability, languages, as well as birth.